Welcome, Yemado. We are thrilled to have you join us today to talk about something that neither Stephanie nor I have heard of, something that's called Boabom. And we love talking with like-minded guests, and we so appreciate you joining us today. And before we dive into the conversation, we'd love to have you start out by sharing what is your one non-negotiable for your day?
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me. One non-negotiable for my day. That's a good question. I would say that because I practice this system, this Boabom, which combines breathing and relaxation, meditation, and self-defense, non-negotiably every day I like to practice. But I practice in many different ways. It doesn't mean that I have to do like a really strong, practice where I'm sweating a lot and moving a lot. For me, I would say every day I have to take a moment to breathe. Take a few moments to breathe, no matter what, no matter where I am. More than that, great. But I would say that's definitely a non-negotiable every day.
Well, that's great. We're going to get more into this, but obviously we're all breathing every day. But what you're talking about is very different for our listeners, and we'll dive into that. So, Yemado, everyone has a story, and we'd love to hear your journey in a nutshell of how you got into Boabom and teaching it, and you have this practice online and in person in Boston.
Yeah, just this month, it's been 19 years that we've had this studio here in Boston. And I think for many years, I don't know, I was always looking for something. I was searching, but I didn't know what I was looking for. And I remember back when I was in college, I had one teacher who was like, you need to go on she was this like, very kind of charismatic and creative person. And I said, you need to go on a vision quest. And I'm like a kid. I'm like, I don't know what this means. And then several years later, I just by happenstance met a teacher who was teaching Boabom, which is this system, like I said, that combines relaxation with meditation and self-defense. And I started taking classes with him. It wasn't like in a formal studio or anything like that. It was more this system was taught more privately for many generations. And its roots are in Tibet. So it was more of like a family system or taught in small groups. And obviously it left Tibet when, many people left Tibet. And so this teacher was a few generations after that. And I started taking classes, and I was working, and at the end of the day, I would do my class, and I would feel so much better. I would feel like re-energized. I would feel alive. And I would feel like my stress kind of like gone. And I liked it so much that I kept practicing. And one of the really nice things about Boabom is that it is progressive, which means that you kind of learn something new every class. So you follow the teacher, and the teacher teaches you one thing. And the next class, they repeat that and teach something else. The next class, they repeat that and teach something else. And I really enjoyed that because it's similar to this concept of just right challenges. I know this from some students of mine who've been like occupational therapists and things like this. This idea that we need challenges that are challenging, but aren't impossible, that we can accomplish. And so this feeling of accomplishment from learning these movements, or from practicing breathing techniques, or improving my concentration in a meditation practice, all of these give you like a positive feedback cycle. And I really experienced that. And I really look forward to every class and what I would learn, and that energy and that feeling. And so from there, over some years, I decided I wanted to learn to teach. I studied, I taught, and decades go by, and here we are.
So that's interesting. And I think, listening to your journey, it reminds me of kind of how I got into yoga and how it just felt great. And so I kept going back, and And then I eventually wanted to get my teacher training, and not necessarily teach, but just to have the knowledge.
Yeah.
But like I mentioned earlier, I had never heard of this before before we learned about you and your studio. And we would love to know, like, what is it? Like, can you actually talk about what is Boabom and what are the benefits? How can it benefit everyone? And how do you start to incorporate it into your like meditation practice, or it is a meditation practice?
So Boabom as a meditation practice has kind of two facets, right? It has a moving meditation, which comprises many different kinds of classes. And then there's seated meditations as well. But I'll start, because most students come to the practice and our school through the movement arts. And in principle, there are two movement arts that are, I would say, open or accessible or make sense for beginners. And one is like a slow art of really stretched out movements. Maybe it looks a little bit like Tai Chi. The movements are a little different. The way of teaching is a little different. Or maybe like a more active yoga. It's less about static poses and more about fluid movements. And then the second art is a defense art, meaning the movements are strong, and they're fast, and they can be used as a very effective defense. One of the really nice things about what we do and how we teach, and one of the things that I really like, because I'm not like a super competitive person, is that there's no contact and no competition. And so you do a Boabom class and you're doing strong movements, but you're not hitting and you're not getting hit. It doesn't mean that we can't, if we're in person, work in partners, we can, but we work in partners without contact. And we do all of this in a progressive way. So in the gentle system, we progress little by little and advance all the time, and the same in the faster. And then beyond that, we have other systems where you can practice with a staff, or there's arts about like falling down and getting back up. And it's a very broad practice. And through all of this is breathing. And the breathing is like the core, or really the armature of the whole system. And we start, the first thing that we learn is breathing, a fundamental breathing technique. And we use that breathing technique. We can use it in different rhythms, but we use it through the whole class to give us a structure to the movements, and at the same time to give some power. So, and that's whether fast or slow, right? We can develop a lot of power, a lot of energy moving slowly, just a different kind of energy. And then this breathing technique is really an integral part of the meditation. So the moving meditation works partially because we're really focused. We're following a teacher, we're moving, we're breathing, we're taking care of our back, we're taking care of our arms. And we really don't have a lot of space left over for all of the other things that are in our mind. And so we spend this time in a class, whether you're doing like an online class or a short video class that's 20 minutes, or an hour-long class, like a live class. We spend this time in our bodies, in our breath, and out and away from what we're doing every day. And this can create a really powerful meditation, especially when we pair it with this progressive teaching. Because I'm sure, as I'm sure you know, like when we repeat something too many times, we can start to do it automatically. And our mind can wander, right? We can think about work, we can think about, our responsibilities, we think about our kids, about school, whatever, wherever we are. That doesn't necessarily get bad things, but the mind wanders all the time. And so by almost tricking ourselves into not thinking about those things, we can really create a powerful kind of meditation. And that's one thing that I've found over the years, is that I've had many, many students. I say, I can't sit still and meditate. I'm looking for something different. And then they get all the benefits of meditation while moving and breathing at the same time. And for, I think, most of them, they're then able, after some time practicing, to develop and work with a seated meditation practice.
So it's really similar to yoga. I mean, I feel like for me, all of what you're describing, I feel like I've gotten out of yoga, except for the self-defense piece, which I could use. So it would be nice to have that self-defense piece, but it sounds very similar to yoga in a lot of ways.
I think so. Absolutely. I think if you saw a class, it would look very different. Right.
Right.
And you would say,
Yeah.
oh,
No,
this looks like,
I
this
saw,
looks like a martial art.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm saying like the benefits you get from
Yes.
it.
And so
Yeah.
that's exactly. Like I think that, and that's interesting because people ask me a lot, is this a martial art? So it's kind of a martial art, but it's kind of more like yoga.
Mm-hmm. It's like a combination almost.
Yeah.
Exactly. And one thing that's really nice about the defense part is that you can learn defense. And I mean, hopefully, we don't have to use it. But the idea is if we have to use it, we can use it well and then get out of there. It's not like, we're trying to like have a fight or something like that. And that's part of like, we don't participate in competitions. We're not interested in competition between our students because all of us come from where we are and all of us can improve and do better, right? And improve ourselves and improve our coordination, our strength, our flexibility, our focus, all of these things.
Yeah. So then how can some of these lessons and the movement and the breath work and the self-defense, how can people incorporate that into their everyday lives to, create more calm and maybe escape from some of the chatter in their heads? How do your students see benefits in their lives after they leave the studio or after they finish the lesson?
There's just simply a benefit, as I'm sure you guys know, just from doing an hour or a half an hour of movement, breathing, and meditation, right? We need that because life is busy. We have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things going on. We need a moment out of that. And, the culture doesn't always give us that opportunity unless we build it in for ourselves. And so I think just at a baseline, just taking that moment is really powerful. Now, if you already have a practice and you're looking, say, to expand with, I want to learn some defense as well, but I want defense that's more in the way or the feeling of a yoga rather than like a more aggressive martial art, then you can try the defense part. And you can say, I feel like I can defend myself if I need to. And part of the defense is, like, I think about the physical self-defense as like this much of it. Because again, if we have to use it, we hope we don't have to use it, but we have to use it. Maybe it's once or twice in our lives. We want to use it and have it work well. But the kind of calm that we can develop while doing strong movements helps us to remain calm in a stressful or tense situation. So with practice, this isn't something that happens in 2 classes, but with practice, we'll find ourselves less going into fight or flight in a physically threatening situation. And a lot of times,
I would say, I was just going to say that's the benefit right there, right? Like that's what we're all trying to achieve is not going into fight or flight, because I feel like the way we live today and the fast-paced world, and a lot of us just like, any little thing can like set you into that. So I think that's a huge benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that applies beyond just a physical defense, like you're alluding to, like anything can send us into that. So the way I think about defense broadly is like a psychological defense, because we have all of those things, all of those triggers all the time. They can be in we can have a weird interaction at work, right? Can be something that happens on the street. Somebody could cut us off or say something, or it can be something that's happening in the world, in the news, or just around us, right? We have all of this like an assault.
I think a lot of people have these triggers right now, and that sets them off into fight or flight. So practicing these techniques will help put them back more in the parasympathetic nervous system and be in a more restful, calm environment, which benefits, has ripple effects on everyone's life. So yeah, this is amazing.
And I love that you said a psychological defense, because when I was researching this and I saw self-defense, I immediately thought of like physical self-defense. It didn't even cross my mind that you were talking about other kinds of self-defense, which obviously there are, but
we don't always think about it in that way.
Yeah.
But I think that's the most essential.
Probably.
And I think it's essential in our society, like you're talking about, but I think this is like universal to being human, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe whatever, 1,000 years ago, or people needed to defend themselves physically more, right? But people still had stress in their lives. And I think that's one of the amazing things about this practice, the Boabom, and is that, it comes from this old tradition. And I think the people who were practicing recognize this, right? That we are better people when we can manage our stress, when we can manage our tension, and when we can kind of like find ways to take the negative energy and like turn it into something positive. It's like this idea that I like, and one of my colleagues wrote a book about this, about recycling with the mind, recycling and taking the negative energy and turning it into something positive. I think many people can find that in their yoga practice or their Tai Chi, and it also happens in Boabom as well. And we can feel like the energy, the weight of the day, and we can breathe, we can move, we can sweat, and we feel lighter.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe we're walking after our class, after our practice, and then we see into our head comes this solution to this problem that we had before, or a different understanding. Or it's like, oh, if I approach this in a different way, or I think about interacting with this person in this way, the result will be so much better.
I mean, this is powerful. More people, everyone probably needs this, like you said. And just with everything going on in the world, and we're all like on edge at different times. I just feel like the last 3+ years, especially. So I love taking the negative energy and turning it into something positive, the recycling with the mind, the book that you referenced, which we'll link up in the show notes. I just think,
and for those of you on YouTube,
powerful.
This is what the book looks like right here.
Yeah.
Yes. Because we all have negative thoughts, and how can we take those and turn it into something positive? And the power, I did a couple of your breathing, the videos that you have on the app, and you talk about this in one of them specifically, just the breathing in and breathing out and getting rid of the negative energy. It's not serving you.
Exactly. I think that, I think most people know how powerful breathing can be, right? As this really, I think the most direct connection we have between our conscious and our subconscious, right? The most direct connection we have to all of the parasympathetic nervous system and everything that's happening under the surface, right? It's very difficult to say, I know there are some practices around this, understand, but it's very difficult to say, okay, heart, slow down. But you can stop and you can slow down your breathing. Through that, you can slow down your heart rate. And it's like if we train ourselves to take a breath before we react, then we can train ourselves to take 2 breaths before we react. And we can learn to take 3. And this can be a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
I think.
And you said that you think most people know that, breathing is important, whatever. But like, obviously, involuntarily that breathing is important to live. But there are a lot of people that actually are not aware of how important breath work is, or they think it's not phony, but like, oh, I don't need to do that. But I mean, for example, just talking about myself personally, like I definitely did not know how to breathe properly for many, many years. And I used to like clench up my stomach and abs and like hold my breath. And when I did learn how to breathe, it was life-changing. And I feel like the people that need it the most are not aware of it, in my opinion.
I think everybody, like, I don't think there's a single human who couldn't benefit from looking at their breathing.
Right.
I think there's absolutely a reason that so many meditation practices have breathing at least at their beginning or their core. Right? The breath is how we bring the world in and how we send the world out. The breath is how we ground ourselves. And I think that whatever our breathing technique, like being conscious, taking that moment to be conscious, it's impossible to be conscious of our breathing all the time.
Right.
Right? It's very, like, I think it's impossible. But the more we practice it, the more we can be conscious, and the more that we can habituate ourselves to having better breath. We don't have to, even when we're not thinking about it, we don't have to breathe shallow or tight all the time. And I think, like with any practice, we need to be patient with ourselves as well and not get frustrated if we practice some breath work and then we find ourselves going into our old patterns. This kind of stuff can take years. Or sometimes when we feel we have an epiphany or learning about it, it's because we've been working on it subconsciously for many years, right? We've been developing all the postural muscles and all the other pieces that are part of that, of the consciousness and the awareness and all of that. But I think taking a moment to breathe is an amazing thing that we can do.
Well, Yemado, what if we, or what if you, I know you offered, teach our listeners a breathing technique or simple, meditation right now on the air for everyone to do. If you're, driving, maybe you press pause and wait until you're out of the car. But I think this would be helpful and it would allow people to understand exactly what you're referring to and to experience it and the benefits.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
And I just want to say also, like you mentioned moving meditations, and you could do this while taking a walk, right?
Absolutely. It's funny, I'll do a little tangent and then I'll get there. I've actually had a number of students over the years who are athletes. And they've actually, as runners or cyclists, have incorporated some of these breathing techniques into their practice and found that it's really improved their endurance and their ability to focus.
Yeah.
I bet.
So you can do it, but it doesn't have to be strong. It doesn't have to be powerful exercise. It can be simple exercise, like you said, like taking a walk. So in Boabom, the breathing technique that we start with, we breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And we do a little thing. We put our tongue behind our top teeth against our palate. And when we inhale through the nose, we make this sound. And what we're doing is we're constricting the nostrils a little bit. And we're kind of cleaning our sinuses a little and also warming the air and humidifying it a little bit. This is especially important in, dry times when it's winter and everything like that, rather than get a big breath of really cold, dry air. We warm it up a little bit so it's less of a shock to our lungs. So we breathe in through the nose. We make that noise. Then we drop our tongue, we round our lips, and we exhale like this. And we make that sound. And when we do that, we try to put a little tension in our stomach, a little bit in our diaphragm, and a little in our chest. And we have a little vibration in the throat. Not a lot. We don't want this. But we're trying to engage the whole breathing system, right? So it's not just chest, it's not just stomach, it's not just diaphragm. It's everything. And with this, we work our core, and we create like a column of air. And with a little practice, you'll feel that this is giving you like some power, some energy in the breath. So we can practice it a couple times. We put our tongue up and we inhale through the nose. Now we drop our tongue, round our lips, and exhale. Now, if you're listening, say, in a more public place, like you're riding on the train or the bus, you don't feel comfortable making a loud noise, you can just breathe in silently. That will give you a lot of the benefits. And then when you go home and you're in private, you can practice with the sound. But don't not do it because you're around other people. Sometimes when we need to do this the most is when we're around other people. And so there's no problem in being intentional and just going in and out through the nose. But let's try it one more time. We'll put our tongue up, breathe in, drop our tongue, and exhale. And if we can do this 3-5 times in the morning, 5 times in the middle of the day, 3 or 5 times in the evening, it's a really nice practice. And one of the things that I've learned and seen over the years of teaching and practicing myself and working with many, many students is that doing a little bit consistently is the best strategy for making any kind of change, for developing any kind of practice. I've seen people try, I'm going to do this every day, and they practice every day, and at some point something happens. And you've set up an expectation of practicing every day, and when you don't do that, you don't feel like you're doing it right, and you cascade. But practicing for 15 minutes, like five breaths, a couple times a day, 3 times a day, or with a meditation practice, practicing for 5 or 10 minutes a couple times a week is an amazing way to start. I think sometimes people feel pressured to, I have to practice an hour, I have to meditate an hour every day because this is what, and I don't think that's necessary. I think you can get there if you want to, but take your time and be patient with yourself.
And doing something is always going to be better than doing nothing. Same thing with workouts, or if you want to change how you're nourishing your body, any small habit, which is great advice.
And I find, like, for my own personal meditation practice and gratitude practice and breathing practice, like really 5 to 10 minutes in the course of a day makes a big difference for me. And when you mentioned an hour, I'm thinking, there's no way I want to do an hour. Like, there's just, like, I don't even want to strive for that. Like, I feel good about what I'm doing right now.
And I think that's great, right? Absolutely. That's the way. I mean, if I personally am doing a longer practice, I'll do a lot of movement and then I'll finish with a meditation. Mm-hmm. So within an hour, you can move for 45 or 50 minutes and meditate for 10 or 15 minutes at the end.
Well, and if I were moving, that would be a different story. I'm picturing like a seated
it's a long
practice.
Time. Yeah. It's a long time, an hour.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll say is that if you're trying to create a meditation practice and you're having trouble, doing 5 minutes of movement first is a really great way. So when I teach a meditation, like a seated meditation class, I always start with 3 movements, and those are in the Recycling with the Mind book. It starts with 3 movements, simple movements. But I think that, like, we can think about the tension that we're trying to release in like many different levels, but always the first level is going to be the tension that we carry in our body. That might be the last level too, but we can always start by releasing a little of that tension, moving the body. And for myself and for my students, I know that doing a little bit of movement, really makes for a much deeper meditation practice.
So I'm curious, like, this is your, profession, and I'm guessing you live and breathe this a lot. I'm wondering if you feel like your body carries tension, or do you just walk around feeling like light and tension free and you don't have a lot of stress, or do you still, like, is your natural personality, I mean, you seem very calm right now, but like, are you type A and you've trained yourself, or like, what is your, like, what does your body feel like on a day-to-day basis?
I'm definitely not a low energy person by any stretch of the imagination. Never have been. You know, there are stories about when I was a kid and people telling my mother, get that kid a pogo stick, you know, like I'm I'm not a low energy person. And I think that's, you know, one of the reasons that I was always so attracted to the Boabom. And like I tried other martial arts and things like that before, and different practices before I found this. But I think practicing for, you know, more than 20 years has definitely helped me to be a lot more calm, a lot more quiet, a lot better able to respond in a positive way in a stressful situation. But that doesn't mean that I never carry tension in my body, right? It doesn't mean that I never get upset or anything like that. I think that's some kind of like, you know, mythical ideal, right?
But
like,
it's more like how you respond to it, I guess, is what I was getting at.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, and the other thing about being in a you know, a body practice, like a movement practice for a long time, is you become aware of your body. And I think this is really one of the big benefits of a regular practice in movement or in meditation, is that it allows you to observe yourself. And you get kind of like a baseline. And you realize, wow, it's really difficult for me today to concentrate for that 10-minute meditation. Or my mind is really wandering when I'm moving. Whereas last week, it wasn't like that at all. When you practice enough, this really becomes a tool for you to see what's going on with you that you might not see above the surface. It might not be front of mind, but it's right there, right under the surface. And I think that this is really important in measuring our reactions. Because, I mean, the easiest example is when we're hungry, it's harder for us to react well, right? We all know that, like, we're low blood sugar, we have a different kind of energy.
Angry.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But if we can be aware of that, we get, okay, I'm going to take a breath before I say this thing or have this response or write this thing on the internet or whatever we're doing. We can develop that awareness little by little over time. And I think it's achievable for anybody. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to teach and practice hours a week. Like many, you know, I teach many classes every week and I have my own practice, but you don't need to do that to get this.
Well, it's funny because when my kids, sometimes if I get irritable or whatever, they'll be like, Mom, take a breath. Yeah. And it's like when you're, and I know that's what I need to do. But when my kid or husband is telling me to take a breath, I'm like, I don't want to hear that from you right now. Like,
and they're only repeating, Marnie, what you've told them.
I tell them, right. It's so funny. And then they bring it right back to me. Mom, take a breath. And I'm like, oh my God.
And so in the moment, you don't want to, right?
I do know that that's probably what I need to do, but I don't want to hear it from them.
I'm the same way. Yemado, could you, as we start to wrap up this conversation, we'd love for you to even to share, like, from one of your students where this meditation and this practice had a really profound impact on their life. I know you mentioned like the runners and the cyclists using the breathing and it's helping with endurance, but maybe at even a more deeper, psychological level even.
Yeah. I mean, I've had so many students who've had just really wonderful changes over their practice and in their lives. I've had a number of students who've really used this practice to deal with and really mitigate like ongoing kind of chronic pain. So whether the gentle or the strong system, if people are coming in, really having a difficult time, the slow system is definitely the way to start. but the combination of like gentle movements, like all of the movements in Boabom are designed to be really gentle on your body. And even the defense movements, they're designed to be a strong defense, but also to use the muscles and not to overstress the joints. And so, for example, if I do like a twisting movement like this, in the twisting, I'm strengthening the whole of the muscle, and the muscle's extending all the way before the joint overextends. So I'm taking pressure off the joint. I'm actually building the muscle around the joint. And so this can help cushion the joint. This is a very like specific and particular example of something, of a way that people have found that this has helped them deal with pain. But also just this general practice of like being mindful and taking care of the body and being conscious of where they are and becoming more healthy. And recognizing like the deep connections between the mind and the body. And if we nourish the two together, we're really able to, overcome a lot. I mean, I've had students who've had to use the defense, like unfortunately, it's always been women, like very sadly. Every student I've ever had who I've known who's ever had to use a defense has been a woman. And it's been somebody coming, grabbing their shoulder, threatening them or whatever, and they use the system and the person like falls to the floor, gets up and runs away.
That's amazing.
Wow.
I mean, that's actually amazing that like, not that that bad things are happening to them, but that they're able to, think about what they learned. Like I always think about, I have taken a few self-defense classes over the years, and I always think about if I were in the situation, I think I would forget everything I learned and panic. So
I think if you're practicing regularly over time, the movements become part of you.
Right.
Yeah. And because that kind of situation is not a conscious situation. It's faster than that. Right. Because all the reports, everybody's, I did it without thinking. And I reacted, and then this happened. It's always been a good result, because it's always been somebody profiling like they want to, because they think the woman is weak or whatever. And they've been able to, break that expectation, and, the power of the defense and the shock of the unexpected has been a very powerful defense, really. But I think it's part of that, like we've been talking about, that regular practice over time.
Right. It just becomes part of you, like you said, and that's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm wondering if you can tell our listeners where people can find you, how they can find your app and connect. And we will, of course, link it all up in the show notes as well.
Sure. So the app is called Boabom Journey, and that's Boabom. The website is Boabom, boabom.com. It's also available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. And so you can just visit the website, learn a little more. And we actually, I have a free gift for your listeners. So anybody who goes to boabom.com/gift, again, that's boabom.com/gift, you can download a free 20-minute class.
Which is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, my pleasure.
Highly recommend you go do that.
Yes.
And that goes through the four main ideas that we explore in more depth in the app. These kind of warm-ups, ways to get the body moving, some gentle movements, which work as a moving meditation, some of the faster defense movements, and then a simple seated meditation that takes this breathing technique and adds like a visualization to it in a way that we can create like a really simple, really accessible meditation that anybody can do anytime.
Wonderful.
And then if people are at all interested in learning more and doing like live classes, We offer live classes here at our studio. We're in Brookline, which is a part of Boston. We also offer Zoom classes. And so all of the classes that we teach are hybrid. We have students in the studio and we have students online. We've been doing this since March of 2020, at least the Zoom part, and the hybrid part more recently. And we have students from, around the world. I'll have a class with people from Vancouver, across the States to Eastern Europe. And it's really wonderful to have that connection and be able to reach people kind of anywhere.
That's fantastic. So as we wrap up this conversation, one question that we love to ask all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
So for me, the art of living well is living in balance. And balance means many different things. Balance for me means being healthy, right? But not being obsessive, right? Not overdoing it. Balance means being measured and aware of where we are and how we're feeling. Like some of these ideas that we were talking about before, I feel like when we're in balance, we're best able to show our best selves to the world and to ourselves. And we can develop this kind of resilience where if we're out of balance and we have a lot of negative and a lot of things always, coursing through us, and little things can set us off really easily, right? And not just set us off, but create whole spirals or cascades, because it's the straw that breaks the camel's back if we have all this other stuff. And so I think finding balance and being in balance is just a really important part of living well, because then we know who we are, we know what we want, and it's okay if we know what upsets us and we know what makes us happy, right? Those aren't bad things. Like getting upset is part of life, right? But like we talked about before, what do we do with it?
Right.
How do we channel that energy? Can we recycle that energy into something positive? Can we develop and build that awareness, that consciousness, and think about it like a technique that we practice little by little over time? In the beginning, it can feel totally like fake to be like, okay, I'm really mad, but I'm going to think about how I can do this in a better way. Right? There's this silly saying like, fake it till you make it. I really like that saying.
Well, can you imagine? Yeah, I was just going to say, can you imagine if the people in the world lived by what you were just saying and tried to live in balance and tried to, when they were feeling upset, took a breath and, really tuned into themselves. I mean, I've been trying to achieve what you just described for years. And I think I'm finally starting to, to be further along on my journey, I guess. Yeah. You're never there, but it takes a lot of conscious effort.
It really does. And I think that we're not always taught that and shown that, right? Maybe they talk about it a little more in school now than they did when I was a kid, which they didn't at all. But that's not what we're taught. That's not what we're expected in our, in our work lives or with our whatever responsibilities as an adult. I mean, maybe we're expected to be perfectly that way as parents, right? Like from zero with no training. And we're not, we never are. But I think that realizing that can be a goal, and understanding that there's no there, right? It is the journey.
Right. Well, and it all starts with us. It all starts with you, our listeners out there, just taking a few breaths every day, and think about, I mean, what you've said, in a nutshell, can have a ripple effect on your life, your family, your community, the world. Like, what if we all, before we, lost our cookies, took some deep breaths every time? Think about it, what a different place this would all be. So everyone out there, just encouraging you to, take a lot of Yemado, what you said, and even if it's just a few breaths, morning, noon, and night.
I just sent like a newsletter, like it's a little newsletter that we send out to everybody who's interested.
I think I got it.
Yes, you probably
sure
did.
I did.
Yeah.
I read it
about that
yesterday.
exact idea.
Yeah,
Like we have some fundamental.
I just read it.
Yeah, there you go. About everything is connected.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly this, and that cultivating ourselves has a huge effect on the world around us. Each of us is like nodes in this immense, like incomprehensible network. And the more good energy we can send in that network, the better for everyone else. And like you say, all of that, the reverberations all come back to us.
Yeah.
Well, this
thank
has
you
been a
so
great
much.
conversation. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure.
We've had a lot of different guests on, and we've talked about breath work and, meditation and different modalities, and I just think however anybody can, find a way to incorporate this into their life, whether it's Boabom or some other modality, it's just the idea of trying and doing it and being mindful, I think, is a great start.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. I a lot of times I know that, there's a lot of complicated things going on in the world right now. But sometimes I think about how lucky we are to live in this moment as people who are searching for something. Because we have a wealth of choices.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And each of us is different, right? Each of us is going to resonate with something. But at the same time, we need to be careful of being complete dilettantes and doing a little of each and everything. At a certain point, I think it's amazing that we have so much. The menu is incredible, but we need to choose. And when we choose, I think it's worthwhile choosing and committing. And then if we don't like that thing after a year or two, we can choose something else. But there's something, like we've been talking about, a regularity or a depth of practice that's really important. So I guess maybe it's a double-edged sword. Like we have this stuff, all these amazing things that we can practice and all these amazing teachers around the world we can learn from. But we need to learn.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and we will look forward to continuing to try out your classes, and we hope that our listeners will as well.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.